Alright mates and matettes, I'm Cunt and we're back to tackle more Science Confirms the Bible with Ken Ham. Today, Ken is going to demonstrate that he has no understanding of how evolution works. While I am certainly no expert, evolution is one of my passions, and I'm actually fairly excited to correct Ken. Crazy, I know. So without further ado, let's dive back into Ken Ham's video.
Atheism is a blind faith. In fact, it's a faith that lacks credulity. It doesn't make sense. And then how do you explain the laws of logic? And how do you explain the laws of nature and the uniformity of nature, that the laws stay the same? How do you do that?
You know what? I think Ken and I are beginning to see eye to eye. Because I agree. Atheism lacks credulity. Giving credulity is the tendency to too readily believe things that are not true. Although the phrase, not all atheists, is prudent here, given not all atheists are scientifically minded. Oh, and just a small tidbit, atheism does not require any faith whatsoever. It's the default position. Also, what are the laws of nature? If you mean the laws of physics, then, from my basic knowledge, they were determined at the moment of the Big Bang, but that could be very wrong, take that with a mountain of salt. Even if it is though, the fact that they are universal constants does not disqualify the possibility of your God not existing. Or any God for that matter.
Who made God? So here's this 9-year-old boy. What do I say to a 9-year-old boy when he says, who made God? How do you answer that? Because you know what, Mum and Dad, I'm sure if you've had kids, you've had them ask that question. How do we answer that? Who made God? So I said to him, well, son, if somebody made God, you'd have to have a bigger God, right? Well, yes, sir. I said, now you got a problem. Yes, sir. Well, who made the bigger God? You'd have to have a bigger God that made the big God that made God, right? Yes, sir. Now you got a problem. Yes, sir. Who made the bigger God? You have to have a bigger God, made the bigger God, made the big God, made God, right? Yes, sir. Now you've got a problem. I know. Because then you'd have to have a bigger God, made the bigger God, made the big God, made the big God, made God. And son, we can keep going back and getting a bigger God, but you know the only thing that makes logical sense, you have to have the biggest God of all.
That's a non sequitur. If you're going to assert that there is a being that has existed forever and has all the omni-qualities you say he does, you could just as easily say that there is an infinite amount of gods who created prior gods. That's how I rationalized it as a Mormon, given that in Mormon theology our God was once on an Earth-like test planet as well, and so is his God ad infinitum. And even if I grant that a hypothetical God is eternal, existing outside of space and time, you would need to be able to demonstrate that outside the claims of your favourite book.
The infinite creator God, infinite in wisdom, infinite in knowledge, outside of time, who created all things just like the Bible says.
Your argument, even if coherent up to this point, only suggests that your God lives outside of space and time and could have hypothetically created a bunch more gods that the Bible is actually written about. It doesn't suggest that he necessarily has any infinite qualities. So can you please stop holding up your book and saying, "Durr science," and acknowledge that your infantile arguments work only on believers who presuppose they're God?
See, it's interesting. When I debated Bill Nye up here on that platform, at the end we had a question time, and one of the questions was written out by a 10-year-old boy. He said, where did matter come from? And so the moderator said, well, Bill Nye, how do you answer the question? Where did matter come from? He said, I don't know. It's a mystery. And then he said, Mr. Ham, how do you answer that question? I said, well, Bill, there is a book that tells us where matter came from, tells us who we are, what life is all about, what our problem is, what the solution is in Jesus Christ.
Well, looks like you're wrong about the question, Ken. The question was, how did consciousness come from matter? Bill Nye's answer was essentially, we don't know, but he followed that up with the fact that we are indeed looking for models as to how that could arise, and that the gap doesn't exactly compromise the scientific model of evolution. Your response that the Bible tells you where consciousness comes from isn't exactly the pinnacle of evidence. Your counter-argument then turned into an accusation that all atheists must be nihilists if they thought through their worldview. By calling Bill Nye's philosophy into question, you have ceased to be a scientist, Ken. Not that you ever were. You've become a lawyer.
And you see, here's the thing. If you think about it, atheists mock it. You believe in an eternal God? How stupid. What do they believe in? Eternal matter? Energy? Eternal energy? Where did it come from? Where did the energy come from? Where did space come from? Where did anything come from? Why does anything exist? I mean, how do they explain that? You see, they have a blind faith, but we have a faith that makes sense of what we see.
Well, physicists don't say whether matter and energy are eternal or had some sort of genesis, but saying we don't know is infinitely more honest than just attributing it to your favourite deity because an old novel said so. Your faith is blind because you assert God without any evidence. People who say we don't know are not making a claim, and as such, they don't have any faith, you cretinous fuck.
And this book, regardless of what anyone claims to be the revealed word of God who knows everything, who says God moved people by his Spirit to give us the true history of the universe, to tell us who we are, where we came from, where matter came from, where life came from. He created out of nothing.
Yep, Please, tell me more about what humans claimed about what God said about the book they wrote. I see no flaws in your faith in such powerful testimony.
Because he's an infinite creator God. Hey, by the way, you know what? I sometimes think about that and contemplate that. What does it mean that God is infinite in knowledge and wisdom? It means no matter how much we know nothing compared to what God knows. And if this is his word, how dare we take what fallible humans say and try and change God's word, like in Genesis?
Like what fallible humans say about the Bible and what inspired them to write it? Oh, sorry, that must be one of the things that, how dare you ask? My mistake.
To try and fit evolution of millions of years in. How dare we do that?
Well done, Greta. Your threat of how dare I has just converted me away from following the evidence and back to believing in your little book. Yay!
Another one of the most asked questions I get asked, how could Noah fit all the species of animals on the ark? That's what Bill Nye said on this stage. You couldn't fit all the species of animals, millions of species. How could you fit them on the ark?
No, that isn't what Bill Nye said. Bill Nye said that the less species you put on the ark, the faster speciation events would have to occur. In fact, using your own estimate of 7,000 kinds on the ark, there would have to be 11 speciation events per day for the last 4,000 years. This has not been observed in the slightest. So, let's continue to see how you misrepresent Mr. Nye's arguments.
Actually, it's the wrong way to ask the question. Because the Bible doesn't say species of animals went on the ark. It says kinds of animals. God made kinds of land animals after their kind. And we read that phrase 10 times in Genesis 1. In Genesis 6, it says that 2 of each kind, 7 pairs of some, but 2 of each kind went on board Noah's ark. And it was only the land animals. So the correct way to ask the question is, how could Noah fit all the kinds of land animals on the ark?
Alright, lovely argument. That would be a very rebuttable point if I knew what the fuck a kind was. If you subscribe to the Hovind school of Do They Bring Forth, then I guess you're in luck, because that's actually called the biological species concept. Keyword being species. The biological species concept states that a species is defined as a group of organisms that can produce fertile offspring together. So you have the same dilemma as when you started counting the number of land animals you needed on the ark. It's just every species, it's too many, you won't fit. Dumbass.
You know, I remember when I was a school teacher in the public schools in Australia, this is back in 1975, the first year of my teaching, and a student said to me, "Hey sir, Noah couldn't fit all those animals on the ark." I said, "How many animals did he need to fit on the ark?" "I don't know, sir." I said, "What size was the ark?" "I don't know." So there's a student who couldn't fit an unknown number of animals in an unknown size ark, so the Bible couldn't be true. That student also failed mathematics, as you could understand.
That's a really nice and touching story. It would be a shame if it was just an anecdote to cast all atheists in a negative light. Wouldn't it, Ken?
But see, most people, when they say, "Oh, Noah's Ark couldn't fit all the animals," ask them, how many? What animals went on the ark? They don't even know what the Bible says, most of them, let alone to come up with an answer.
Lucky for you, I used to be a Mormon, so I really, really know what the Bible says. It's actually kind of painful.
One of the things I explained on the second session this week was that the word kind, translated kind in English, in the Bible comes from the Hebrew word mean. And we would say, in most instances, when you look at your classification system, kingdom, form, class, order, family, genus, species, in most instances, We would say the kind in the Bible represents the family level of classification.
Okay, so I don't know why half that list of taxonomic clades has been assigned to fit with mammals, given that many non-mammals and even non-chordate land animals exist. So I'm just going to assume your family equals kind definition applies to all land-dwelling creatures because you didn't specify, so I'm sorry if I misrepresent your position. There are 5,300 families according to a study I found in the PLOS Biology Journal, link in the description. And 50 to 80% of animals live underwater, so I'm going to meet in the middle and say 65% of animals are water dwelling and 35% of 5,300 families represents Ken's number of kinds on the Ark. This means that the Ark had 1,855 pairs of animals on it. While ventilation, waste management and food are still enormous problems, not to mention fish and vegetation surviving in brackish water. The biggest problem by far is how this makes Bill Nye's point from earlier even more valid. 11 speciation events a day is ridiculous, Ken, especially when we are only talking about land animals.
Not genus, not species in most instances, mainly family. And that means 2 of each family, 7 pairs of some, went on board Noah's Ark. And I explained this in the session on One Blood, One Race that I did on Tuesday. But if you take dogs, lots of different species of dogs, about 34 different species of dogs, okay? But you can document how they're all connected in one way or another. This one will actually breed with this one, that one bred with that one bred with that one, that bred with that one. You get the idea? You can.
Yeah, I get the idea. In fact, if you follow that back, you end up with what's called a phylogenetic tree, and it includes every organism on it, once you explore every branch, that is. That's because evolution happens and science isn't decided by a bunch of old fucks in a room looking at pictures of canids and saying, oh, don't they look similar?
We had researchers do that for the Ark, which is why on the second deck of the Ark, we have an estimate of how many kinds we think were in the Ark, and we've actually overestimated for a number of reasons. But with dogs, see, what we would say is there's only one kind of dog. It is called dog. This gets very technical. I want you to understand that, okay?
The fact that this is not so technical is not a point in your favour. I really hope you understand that. I mean, your lack of technicality means that your model lacks explanatory power. Come on, Ken, this is basic stuff.
So my point is, what were they? Dogs. What are they? Dogs. What will they be? Dogs. Is that evolution? The answer is no, that's just dogs.
Sure, all canids will continue to be canids because you can't jump taxa. That's not how evolution works. The fact of the matter is that evolution does occur though, regardless of how misinformed you are. Canids will continue to evolve by natural selection and speciate into different canids. That's how evolution works.
And so when you look at the classification system, there is one dog family, Canidae, and that would be the dog kind. So you didn't need all the species of dogs on the Ark. In fact, we would say those species that I showed you didn't exist until after the flood anyway, all right? And so one dog kind, so you only need 2 dogs on the Ark. With cats, there's one cat kind because there's one cat family. Now with elephants, we think the kind is at the order level. But the point is, it's mainly at the family level.
The fact that you're just ripping branches off of phylogenetic trees without considering what they're connected to annoys me. But your argument is not the proof that Noah's Ark could have occurred because the amount of room on the Ark is only one of many problems.
Which is why when you go to the Ark on the first deck, actually, down at the bow end, you'll see a Noah's Ark model there, and you'll see all the different kinds of land animals listed there on the wall, and we estimate about 1,400 kinds.
Hey, I wasn't that far off with my estimate. Now that means that your model still doesn't work for the aforementioned reasons, so while you're living in your fairy tale land, I'd ask that you have fun with your obscenely fast evolution. And yes, that's what speciation is.
Now we think in reality it could be less than 1,000 kinds. And the reason we do that is because within a kind you can have lots of different species, but if we haven't seen those species or documented that they can interbreed, we leave them as separate kinds. And then when it comes to the fossil record, you can't actually see the fossils breed. They're dead.
The fossil record and the classification of species is a tough beast to tackle. Usually a combination of factors is considered when classifying the species of an organism in the fossil record, so I will admit your imprecision is valid here. Younger samples may be able to have their DNA sequenced, but older organisms must be classified with morphology and age, which makes the process far less precise. So you erring on the side of caution was a smart idea, though it doesn't help your case whatsoever. So let it be known that Ken Ham once managed to only kind of fuck up a point. However, your belief that organisms of the same family can interbreed the majority of times isn't necessarily true. Organisms of the same genus may be able to create infertile offspring, but that is far less common for families. This is all just food for thought, given the death knell has already sounded many times for Ken's argument. This is really just a bonus round on why Ken Ham is wrong.
Now, think about it. Those dogs have all this incredible amount of information in their DNA that God put there to start with. See, God created pools of information with incredible genetic diversity within each pool. The dog pool, the cat pool, the elephant pool, the human pool. Get the idea? Incredible amount of information, because matter can't produce information by itself.
Yay, we're asserting this again. For a more comprehensive rebuttal on the matter cannot produce information argument, look at my previous video in the series, Ken Ham is wrong about DNA. Suffice it to say that we don't know does not equate to God did it. Also, in regards to Ken's incredibly diverse gene pools, most land-dwelling organisms, certainly in the case of dogs, are diploid. This means that they have 2 of each of their chromosomes, one inherited from each parent. Thus, they have 2 chromosomes of each gene. There are some genes, however, that have multiple different alleles, beyond that which can be carried by 2 individuals of the species, let alone an entire family worth of alleles. Unless they are originally polyploid, I have no idea how Ken thinks that he could fit an entire family's worth of genetic diversity into 2 individuals.
An incredible amount of information, and because of the genetic diversity that God already put there, when those dogs come off the ark and they spread out and move to different places, different combinations of genes from that genetic diversity survive better in different groups, and some genes are lost and so on, and you end up with all these different species of dogs, and that can happen very, very quickly, but it's not evolution.
You just described evolution by natural selection, specifically allopatric speciation. Due to different environmental selection pressures acting on populations of the same species which are isolated by some barrier, certain traits are favoured, and over thousands or even millions of years they will no longer be able to interbreed and have thus evolved. That's an example of allopatric speciation in any case. Stop being so dishonest, and please stop misleading your followers with your scientific illiteracy.
And you see, when that happens out there in nature, we call it natural selection, but natural selection only results in new combinations of already existing information, loss of information from the genetic diversity that was there to start with, or conserving information, but there's no brand new information. It's the opposite of evolution. So natural selection is a downhill process, not an uphill process.
Evolution by natural selection is the way that different traits are selected and organisms change over time. The genetics aren't that important because the theory does stand independent of them. Even when the genetics are factored in, they just confirm what we knew about natural selection and deepens our understanding of it. There are random events that can occur in an organism's DNA called substitutions, insertions, and deletions. This causes the DNA code to be altered in a number of ways. Refer to my previous video in the series for a slightly more in-depth explanation. Suffice it to say that these alterations sometimes improve the organism in the context of the environment, and thus it is more likely to reproduce and pass on the mutation to their offspring.
Here's the picture I used with Bill Nye. I said, see, evolutionists believe there's one tree of life. And so they have these animals on here, and they believe they're all connected. Do you believe that, you realize evolutionists believe humans are related to all the animals and related to all the plants? That's true. I mean, I've actually got video of Bill Nye when I took him through the ark admitting, yes, we're related to bananas. Bananas.
We are related to bananas, but probably not in the way you think. See, we're related in the sense that way back when eukaryotes were the most advanced, please note that's a colloquial use of the word, organism running around, it diverged into plant and animal cells. We're made up of the animal ones, and plants are made up of the plant ones. Ultimately, this means we are related. It's like how Ken believes all humans are related, but evolution concerns itself with population genetics, not individual genetics. So the word related really just refers to populations which originated from the same source, which as far as we can tell, is everything. So that's not exactly some be-all end-all admission from Bill Nye, unless you're arguing from personal incredulity. The great Ken Ham would never do that. Right?
Remember that the next time you're eating a banana, my relative. So that's the interesting thing when you have these people out there who say, we shouldn't eat animals, we should only eat plants. And particularly when they're doing it from an evolutionary perspective, and so on. But wait a minute, plants and animals are all related if they're evolutionists, so then you shouldn't eat anything.
Most vegetarians and vegans who aren't doing it for an environmental reason are not eating meat to minimize suffering of animals. By all accounts, plants are not conscious and do not experience suffering the same way animals do. I have never heard of someone who doesn't eat meat because they're related to animals. Although, for the record, if I did hear that reasoning for not eating meat, I would think it's stupid. Because, it's fucking stupid.
So evolutionists believe there's one tree of life. They believe matter formed information, matter formed a language system. Over millions of years, all this new information came along. And what Darwin did, he says, you notice in finches there's different species. In dogs there's different species. And so it goes on.
One of Darwin's observations of Galapagos finches was that the finches' beaks were different depending on the food source available to them on the various islands. Now, you may say the shape of a beak is proof of nothing, but in our modern era of genetics, we know now the gene responsible for causing changes in the beak. In fact, it's mutations in two genes that, in turn, control the expression of the genes that actually make the beak, which leads to the different beak sizes observed. A mutation in the gene for BMP4 will alter the width and height of the beak, while a mutation in CAM will change its length. These mutations necessarily require a nucleotide or nucleotides being added, taken away, or substituted, and in one of those scenarios your definition for increasing genetic information is met. These different species arise because of increasing or at least changing genetic information. Why can't this be extrapolated back, Ken? You were starting with your belief in kinds, not an impartial consideration of the evidence.
And so they join these branches up, which you don't see, and they say, see, it's one big tree of life. But in actual fact, what you observe is a whole orchard of trees. And so you have the dog tree. God put all this genetic diversity in there so you get different species of dogs, but that tree stays the dog tree. And then you have the elephant tree. And then you have the cat tree. You get the idea? This is what you observe. And this is what observational science confirms, not this. So the Bible is confirmed by genetics.
The branches are joined based on a lot of evidence and various principles of evolution. To sink to your level, basal canids looked very similar to the organism they descended from. There are not just lines connecting dogs and bananas, rather a slow progression from very simple to complex, following many different lines which diverge and multiply. There is no orchid observed, only a tree of life which can be confirmed with empirical or observational evidence.
All right, let me show you a short video that we produced to help explain all this now and bring it all together.
Fuck man, it's late and I'm getting tired. Can we just skip the video? No? Ugh.
You hear this one a lot. Science has proven evolution, therefore evolution is true. Since evolution is true and Christians don't believe it, then Christians don't believe science and they aren't rational people.
Whoa, Nettie, careful how fast you gish gallop there. You could hurt someone. Most Christians believe evolution. Only your band of merry men think that the Bible is to be taken literally, so don't try and conflate your movement with all of Christianity. It will not end well for you.
Really, let's put that claim to the test. First off, evolution in the sense that things change is evident. No rational person disputes that. Therefore, rational Christians believe it. We can observe change. But evolution in the sense that life came from non-life and then that life began to randomly generate new genetic information and over time it eventually produced humans is something entirely different.
It's actually no different. The mechanism is certainly the same, only the timescale is different. While we don't know how abiogenesis occurred, life producing non-life isn't a part of evolution. It isn't the theory of bloody everything, funnily enough.
and something that quite honestly doesn't hold up against science. In other words, evolution in the sense of molecules to man is not scientifically plausible and therefore should not be viewed as scientific fact. Quite honestly, it is in great opposition to science, that is, observational science, the kind of science we can test and repeat and use our five senses to understand.
Not scientifically possible? Funny how nearly every scientist in the world disagrees with you on that. As I've stated earlier and in the last video, mutations occur. That is a fact, and the mechanism is well known. If a little complex to go in depth on this channel and with my education level, though I'm happy to try if anyone would like to see that. Mutations will add new information. That is also a fact. This means that variation will exist in a population and evolution is therefore possible. Observational science is just science, by the way. Ken likes to split science into things that occurred today and things that occurred in the past. The study of anything in the past counts as historical science to him and doesn't actually contribute to science because we can't see and touch it. The irony of him believing in a god is palpable, I know. So while evolution can indeed be tested and observed, Mr. Ham will continue to misrepresent it. Goody.
Science demonstrates that over time, living organisms lose genetic information. They don't gain it. That same science demonstrates that life doesn't arise from non-life.
When has science shown this? Losing genetic information over time is not something that is observed with startling regularity. Even when a structure is lost, it's often a new bit of information that breaks the gene or tells the DNA not to read it. That being said, deletions can and do occur. I don't know where you're getting this organisms only lose genetic information idea from though. Life arising from non-life is a tangent that need not be touched because it's not demonstrated as impossible at all. It is simply unknown.
Follow along if you would. Fact 1. There is no known observable process by which new genetic information can be added to an organism's genetic code.
Mutations? Okay, I'll see myself out. I think you guys understand that they add genetic information by this point.
None. That pretty much refutes evolution right away because there's no way to go from a fish to an amphibian without adding new information, right? If living organisms cannot produce new genetic information, how can anything gradually change into something of higher intelligence or form or complexity?
They can. Fucking mutations!
That is, how can anything evolve from an amoeba to a man without adding new genetic information? The answer, of course, is that it can't, plain and simple. Now, some have speculated and they have imagined all kinds of things, and they brought in artists to produce creative renderings based on guesses, and they have been successful in telling a very convincing story that humans evolved from ape-like creatures. But those are just drawings, people. They're just stories.
Artistic renderings are used by the science journalism community, not to convince people of the actual science. Boring and hard to read articles are what tells us the very convincing story here. Unlucky for you though, these stories are non-fiction.
But what we really observe is humans are humans and apes are apes. Now, if fact 1 buried evolutionary thinking deep into the Precambrian soil, this next fact, fact 2, tosses so much sediment on it that not even the greatest team of paleontologists with the latest subterranean gizmo could dig up the remains. Check this out. Never, again, never has it been observed that life can come from non-life. So,
Oh, for the love of... Abiogenesis is not a part of evolution, nor do we know how it happened, but that doesn't mean it didn't.
here are 2 major scientific evidences against evolution.
Sorry for the interruption. I've just got to go shear my sheeps. Be right back.
I reiterate for clarity, life has never been observed to come from non-life, and there is no known, observable process by which new genetic information can be added to the genetic code of an organism. So, molecules to man evolution doesn't really make scientific sense. Yet we are all here, and life is all around us in various forms. Although evolution cannot account for this, the Bible can. The Bible reveals that the all-powerful, all-knowing, supernatural God created the heavens and the earth out of nothing, and all life according to its kinds, that is, each with its own set of genetic information. So, again, what the Bible reveals makes sense of what we see and understand. Evolution does not. Enough said.
You are so completely wrong for all the reasons I've laid out. It's bloody incredible.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it, to see all that?
Not in the slightest. Actually quite mind-numbing. For that reason, I'm going to end the video here. I hope you enjoyed it, and whether you did or didn't, feel free to leave a rating. Comment any feedback you have. All of it helps, and please correct me on any errors I've made. Subscribe if you want to see my future content, as well as an end to the series, and I will see you next Thursday.